The silent witness. The city of Crestwood had always been a quiet place, nestled between rolling hills and a winding river. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and crime was almost unheard of. But one fateful night, a single act of violence shattered the town's peace forever. James Hollister, an aging millionaire known for his extravagant lifestyle and ruthless business dealings, stood on Crestwood Bridge, staring at the dark waters below. The moonlight reflected off the river's surface, casting eerie shadows along the banks. At his side stood a man whose face was hidden beneath a dark hoodie, Trevor Langley, a man who had lost everything because of James Hollister. Trevor's hands clenched into fists as he glared at the old man. Hollister had once been his employer, but through deception and greed, the millionaire had ruined him. Trevor had trusted him, invested his life savings into a deal that Hollister later revealed was a fraud. His home was gone, his wife had left him, and he was drowning in debt. And now, it was time for revenge. "Please, Trevor, let's talk about this," Hollister pleaded, stepping backward toward the railing. Trevor shook his head. "You never listened when I begged you to help me. Why should I listen now?" Hidden in the darkness, unseen by either man, a small figure crouched behind the thick metal beams at the end of the bridge. 8-year-old Tommy Carter had snuck out of his house that night, his flashlight gripped tightly in his hands. He loved exploring the city at night when the world was quiet and still, but tonight, his innocent adventure had led him into something terrible. Tommy's heart pounded as he watched the two men argue. He wanted to run, to scream, but something kept him frozen in place. Trevor grabbed Hollister by the collar and pulled him toward the railing. "All that money, all that power, and you never thought twice about the people you destroyed." Hollister's breath was ragged. "You think this will fix anything?" Trevor didn't answer. He shoved. A sharp, startled cry pierced the air as the old man tumbled over the railing, arms flailing, eyes wide with terror. The splash that followed echoed across the empty streets. Then, silence. Trevor stood still, staring at the dark river below, chest heaving. It was done. He turned to leave, but something made him pause. A feeling, an instinct, told him he wasn't alone. Slowly, he turned his head, and that's when he saw him. A child. Tommy. Trevor's stomach dropped. For a moment, neither moved. The boy's wide eyes shimmered in the dim light, filled with fear and something else, understanding. Trevor took a slow step toward him. "Hey, kid," Tommy bolted. "Wait," Trevor called, but the boy was gone, his small figure disappearing into the night. Panic surged through Trevor's veins. The kid had seen everything. Now, he had a witness. A dangerous game. Tommy ran as fast as his legs could carry him, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He reached his home, slipped in through the back door, and locked it behind him. His heart was pounding so loudly he thought his mother would hear it. Upstairs, he crawled into bed and pulled the covers over his head. But sleep never came. The image of the man falling off the bridge played in his mind over and over. He had to tell someone, but who would believe him? And then a chilling thought crept in. What if the man who killed him came looking for him? The next morning, Tommy avoided his parents and went straight to school. But the fear never left him. Every time he passed a stranger, he flinched. Every shadow made him jump. Meanwhile, Trevor was unraveling. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy. He tried convincing himself that maybe the kid hadn't seen much. Maybe he could scare him into silence. That night, he found himself parked outside the Carter house. The lights were off. He watched, waiting. Then he saw him. Tommy stood in his bedroom window, staring out into the night. Their eyes met. Trevor's blood turned cold. The boy knew. He had to do something. The final confrontation the following evening, Tommy was walking home from school when a car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. "Hey, kid," a voice said. Tommy froze. It was him. Trevor leaned slightly out of the driver's seat, his face tense. "We need to talk." Tommy shook his head and took a step back. "I know you saw," Trevor continued, his voice low. "I know you want to tell someone, but that'd be a mistake." Tommy's hands clenched into fists. He was terrified, but he wouldn't let this man scare him. "I already did," he said. Trevor's expression darkened. You're lying. The boy lifted his chin. The police know. Trevor's jaw tightened. He couldn't tell if Tommy was bluffing, but he couldn't take the risk. Sirens. The sound of wailing sirens filled the air, growing louder. Trevor's head snapped toward the road. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, coming straight toward them. Tommy stepped back. I told you, he said quietly. I saw everything. Trevor cursed under his breath and slammed his car into drive. The tires screeched against the pavement as he sped off, but it was too late. The police cars blocked the road ahead. He was trapped. As officers swarmed his vehicle, Trevor knew it was over. Tommy watched from the sidewalk, his small hands trembling. He had been scared, but he had done the right thing. Hollister had died without justice, but Tommy made sure his killer didn't escape. As Trevor was handcuffed and led into the back of a police car, he locked eyes with the boy one last time. Tommy didn't look away. For the first time since that terrible night, he felt safe. And Trevor knew he had lost. Trevor Langley sat in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room at the Crestwood Police Department. His hands were cuffed to the metal table, and sweat beaded at his temple despite the chill in the air. Across from him, Detective Sam Grayson leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the surface. You want to tell me what happened on that bridge, Langley? The detective asked, his voice calm but firm. Trevor swallowed hard. He knew there was no way out. The kid had seen everything. But maybe, just maybe, he could spin this in his favor. It was an accident, he muttered. Hollister and I were arguing. He lost his balance and fell. Grayson exhaled, leaning back in his chair. An accident, huh? Funny, because an 8-year-old kid says otherwise. Trevor's jaw clenched. The kid's confused. The detective slid a file across the table and opened it. Inside were photos. Hollister's body, found downstream the next morning, battered against the rocks. His skull had cracked open on impact. There was no chance he had survived the fall. Grayson studied Trevor closely. Hollister didn't just trip, Langley. We found scuff marks on the railing, like someone was struggling, and the kid saw you shove him. Trevor's mouth went dry. You got a choice here, Grayson continued. Come clean, or we let a jury hear the kid's story. And believe me, a little boy's testimony? That's gonna bury you. Trevor knew the game was over. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, he finally admitted. I wanted him to pay for what he did to me. Grayson nodded, signaling the officers. Well, you got your wish. He's gone. And now, so are you. The door opened, and 2 uniformed cops entered, grabbing Trevor by the arms and hauling him to his feet. As he was led out of the room, his thoughts weren't on Hollister anymore. They were on the boy, the silent witness who had unknowingly sealed his fate. Tommy's new reality days passed, but the fear never truly left Tommy Carter. Even though Trevor was in jail, he couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked around every corner. His parents knew something was wrong. They had found out what happened through the police, and though they were proud of him for coming forward, they also knew the trauma would take time to fade. Tommy couldn't sleep at night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the man falling off the bridge. He saw Trevor's cold stare when their eyes met in the dark. But as time passed, things slowly began to return to normal. The town moved on from the murder, though it remained one of the most shocking crimes Crestwood had ever seen. Then, one evening, as Tommy was walking home from school, he noticed something strange. A black car, parked across the street. He didn't recognize it. His heart pounded. The window was tinted, but he could feel eyes watching him. Was it Trevor's friend? Someone who wanted revenge? Swallowing his fear, Tommy quickened his pace and rushed inside his house. He locked the door and peeked through the curtains. The car sat there for another 5 minutes. Then, slowly, it pulled away. Tommy shuddered. Had it just been his imagination? Or was the nightmare not over yet? The shadow that lurks days passed without another sign of the car. Tommy started to believe maybe it had just been a coincidence. But then, the notes began appearing. The first one was tucked into his backpack at school. You shouldn't have talked. Tommy's blood ran cold. He looked around, but no one was watching him. The second note came 2 days later, slipped under his front door. He's not the only one you should be afraid of. That night, Tommy barely slept. The fear that had once begun to fade came rushing back stronger than ever. Who was watching him? Who was sending the notes? And most importantly, was he still in danger?